Hey, this is Don from Padlock Technologies once again, and this is the last firewall comparison or next generation firewall comparison video that I am going to make. So we did the FTD, we did Palo Alto yesterday, we did checkpoints. I'll put a card up there for the checkpoint video, and now we're going to do Fortinet, or FortiGate. So let's log in here real quick. So quick setup, same lab, just now we're doing the Fortinet. So the Fortinet firewall is right here. And let's be honest, or I'll be honest here. Fortinet firewall is probably out of all the next generation firewalls, the easiest to set up and the easiest to understand, right? Really simple setup. A lot of people move to Fortinets because of the ease of use. Now, again, next generation firewalls are pretty much the same now all across the board. The hardest to probably learn is the checkpoint because it has a different logic than the other next generation firewalls. But this Fortinet FortiGate is usually called the poor man's Palo Alto. Why? Because in the space, it's either, in the space, you kind of have Palo Alto, Fortinet neck and neck, Palo a little bit above. FTDs are kind of wedged in the middle there as well when it comes to next generation firewalls. But the easiest one to learn out of all the platforms, like I said, is the Fortinet firewall. Now we're going to log in here and I'm going to show you what it looks like. Let's log in. Hopefully I type in the right one now. Of course I would type in the wrong password. Let's see. There we go. So from the first look out here, this is the dashboard, gives you a lot of information. Now, when you first set this thing up, you have two options, a basic view, which doesn't give you all these options, and a comprehensive view, which gives you all of these options here, right? So think about this from an FTD standpoint, when you log in and you see the dashboard, you have all your widgets and stuff like that. And then the same thing with the Palo Alto when you log in and you have all your widgets. The thing that you don't have on checkpoints is a lot of this widget customization stuff. But like I said, all the firewalls are pretty much the same, right? Pretty much does everything the whole time. It's funny because people get in these debates, which one is the best firewall, such and such and such and such. And in reality, they're all the same. It's just what ecosystem you're comfortable with. Now, the one thing I do want to show you, and I'm going to move myself down real quick so you can see this. The one thing I want to show you here is, and I think Cisco and Palo Alto should probably steal this feature, is the ability to get to the CLI directly from the dashboard here. Now, I believe the FDM does have this feature in there, but on the FTD or FMC managed device, doesn't have it. The FDM does have this. So that is one great feature on Cisco's FDM platform is you can get to the CLI from on box, right? And what you would do is right up here, looks like a command prompt. Hopefully you guys are seeing where I'm clicking at here. Let's see, there we go. Looks like a command prompt there. And when you click on that, it opens up the command prompt right here, right? So you can do simple stuff like show router routes, I believe. Let's see. Now the difference here is you have to tab, I believe. I could do show router static, and that's going to show me the static route there. So that's the static route that I configured. Now let's take a look at this. And this is the difference between the CLI configurations. Because you, in normal mode, when you want to configure something, you would do configure router static, and then you would use the edit command. So edit one. So this is the first static route. You're going to set the gateway to this. You're going to set the device port, which is just port one, and then you're going to make a comment of default route, right? And this is just the static route. Now there is no save once you back out. It automatically saves it when you back out of things. Um, a lot of people are not used to this. This is sort of like Juniper, right? Because in Juniper, you can go into a configuration and edit it, right? So it's kind of similar to that. But to configure a port, like if I wanted to show, I think system interface port one, I believe. So this is the port one configuration. So this is what I did manually. behind the scenes. So I went to edit port, when I configured it, it was configured system interface. Then I said edit port one. Then I set all of these things on it. Really, I only set the IP. I did the alias, and you could set like a status up command. You can use that as well, but it's pretty easy to figure out how to configure things on a 48. It's kind of like if you're from a programming background, it's real easy to figure out. Same thing with Juniper. If you're from a lot of people that are programmers kind of like the Juniper syntax because it's kind of in that vein. Now, from a Cisco standpoint, iOS XR is kind of in that vein as well, where if you have a programming background, it's very easy to get up and running on iOS XR. Um, from a route, from a standpoint, now in Palo Altos, you would use the run command. In Fortinet, you're going to use the execute command. And in Cisco, you just type ping. So if I wanted to ping something, you do execute ping. Now, I believe there's a count that I can put in here because I don't want it just to be continuous. Okay, so I just do that. And it'll do the ping command, right? Now, Control C will get you out of it. Oh, well, actually, just does four. If I were to do this without the execute command, doesn't work, doesn't know anything. So you have to use the execute command to actually do something, right? And in Palo Altos, you have to use the run command when you are in this situation here. I should have showed you that on the Palo Alto. I'll probably show that on the next video or a different video. But being able to get to the CLI and instantly see, like, I don't have to try to SSH to it. I can just go to the GUI and boom, pop this up. One great feature. Now, I want to show you something though. So let's go back to our checkpoint. We're going to log into the checkpoint. Yeah. Come on. We're going to log into the checkpoint here. And I'm going to show you something. You see that little box right there? Now remember, checkpoint came out first. It was the OG of next generation firewalls. What is that right here? Open terminal. Click that, takes you right to the terminal. Looks kind of familiar, doesn't it? Same thing I just did on the Fortinet. So again, this is why I keep telling y'all, it's not as hard as you think it is to learn these firewalls because they take bits and pieces from each other and implement it in their version of the software. Since Checkpoint came out first, a lot of the stuff that you see in other next generation firewalls was snatched from Checkpoint. Like the whole Blade concept, again, there are profiles in other platforms, but Checkpoint had it first. This whole getting to the terminal inside the GUI, Checkpoint had it first, right? And I'm giving Checkpoint some love because they had it first. Let's be honest. And then and you got to respect the past to respect the future, right? Now, checkpoints are still in the wild. It's still in the environment. So knowing that a lot of this stuff came from Checkpoint, and then you see it in other implementations of firewalls, gives you a little bit of history and a lot more respect for how far this space has come. So that was I just wanted to show you that because a lot of people didn't realize that, hey, a lot of people that don't know checkpoints didn't realize that this and FortiGate came from Checkpoint. All right. So this is a lot. Now, reporting is really crazy on Fortinet. Mostly all logging is great on mostly every next generation firewall. You have your SSL uh, RAVPN monitoring, your IPsec monitoring, quarantine monitoring for the client monitoring, monitoring. I'll keep getting crazy here. DCP monitoring. So if I go to DCP here, there should be one, which is my test machine behind. So it's this machine here that we're looking at. And then obviously it's going port 3, the LAN port, and this is some DHCP information that you set up. Now, the one thing from that I want to show you from a system perspective, because NAT, there's two ways you can do NAT, right? There's profile based, and then there's this thing called central NAT. I learned central NAT, and when I learned central NAT, I never went back to the profile way of doing it, which is doing it within the policy or policy based. Sorry, policy based versus central control or central NAT. And where you're going to see that at is if you go to settings, scroll all the way down here, And right here where it says this is the next generation firewall mode profile basis for your profile security profiles. But right here where it says centralized NAT is you're going to have a menu where all your NAT configurations are going to be. So it kind of makes it similar to a Palo Alto with a separate NAT policy, security policy. Then you have, FTD, separate NAT policy, separate security policy, checkpoint, separate NAT policy, separate security policy. If you do not do this, what ends up happening is when you create your security policy, you'll also create your NAT role, right? Like if you go from LAN to WAN, you can create your NAT rule within the policy, which can cause some confusion if you don't know how to read Fortinet policy language. HA, what, like I said, HA is Fortinet's are pretty simple to configure. HA is the easiest to configure on a FortiGate. Now I'm not talking about the previous OS that FortiGate had. The FortiGate now OS, super simple, right? So you would go here, you can either do active, active, or active passive. Where did you see that at? You saw that on Palo Alto's active, 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 passive. Um, I would normally 90% of the time you're going to use, I would say 95 or more. You're going to use active standby. Rarely are you going to do active active because there are some cons with using active active, and it, the pros kind of don't outweigh the cons of it, right? Depending on who you ask. So you go to active passive, you give it a group name, you give it a password, you do session pickup, which is just sharing the sessions. You would say, okay, what interface do I want to use for my heartbeat, and what interfaces do I want to monitor, which is your data interfaces. Sort of like when you do a Cisco, you say this is your interface policy to say, okay, if 50% of my interfaces go down, move over to the other one, right? Management interface reservations. You don't. Most people don't set this up when they do active passive, and then unicast heartbeat. If you have the links together, if you have them in interfaces together, you're rarely going to configure these two here, right? But most of 100% of the time, you're going to figure the group name, the password, the session pickup, the monitor interfaces, the interfaces you want to monitor. So if they go down, it's going to go to the passive one or failover, what happened, and then you want the heartbeat interface, and that's really it. Device priority, obviously, the higher priority will come the primary, whereas in Palo Alto's, the lower the priority becomes the primary. And then once you set this up on both sides, they'll do their little syncing of information, and then you'll have your active standby configuration, or you'll have your HA configuration there, right? And then whatever you do on the primary will sync over to the secondary. What else is here that I want to show you? So I'm not going to go to security fabric because that's Fortinet's ecosystem, and I don't want to make this video too long about FortiGates. But logging and reporting, again, a lot of the log stuff is pretty, in your face. Like you can get a lot of information from this. But again, like I said, most next generation firewalls are pretty much the same. It's about the ecosystem that you're comfortable with because you can get the same detailed logging information no matter what platform you're technically in nowadays. So we can go to forward traffic. This will just tell you, hey, let's see here. My test TC looks like this is probably DNS. So if I clicked on this DNS one, double click, where did you see this at? You saw it on the FTD and unified events. You go to unified events, you double click one of your events, it pulls out this side menu, gives you a boatload of information about what it is. So for here, it would be, my IP address to source, that's my machine, got natted to the outside interface, tells me what PC that is, that's some DHCP, tells me the destination where it's going, what port it's going, it's telling me it's DNS. You got some send and receives, and the action tells you the policy, which is I said this was the Texas 48, and then the Texas net policy, and then it gives you the timestamp of that information. The centralized net policy here was the centralized net is net policy one. So again, from a logging standpoint, like I said before, this is unified events in Cisco FTDs, right? When you have a FMC managed FTD, this is literally the same thing. Unified events gives you, now, I will tell you that unified events gives you a lot more detail right? Because you'll see the SSL decryption stuff as well. But because I don't have SSL decryption turned on, I'm probably not going to see it in this unified event or in this forward traffic event. Then you have your individual stuff like antivirus events, web filters events if you're doing that, SSL decryption events, DNS query events, file filters, application control events, and IPS events, and abnormal events, right? Now, we don't have sniffer traffic because I did not set an interface to do that, so you won't have sniffer traffic. And then local traffic, none's coming from locally from the box itself that I'm logging, so we don't have to worry about that. Main one you're going to be looking at is forwarded traffic in any of these category events. Now, user administration, do you set up radius? This is for, if you're doing remote access VPNs, you want to use some type of radius authentication on the back end, you would set it up here. Same thing with LDP server stuff, which is our LDAP. Now, I don't know why I said LDP, but LDAP server, if you want to not use radius and you just want to do a bind to AD, single sign-ons, you could use that for other situations for like SAML authentication. And then authentication settings. Fortinet is so simple to configure that you can probably figure this out without actually reading too much documentation because they pretty much put it in your face. Like, this is what it does. They name the thing exactly what it does. Rarely do you see them name something and it's doing a totally different function. And you're like, well, why would you name it that? Because that's not what it does. And that's why I said Fortinet's pretty simple. From a VPN standpoint, you have IPsec tunnels and you have your SSL VPNs, which is your RA VPN stuff. Route-based tunnel. Where do you see that? Palo Alto's, they use route base. Fortinet use route base. FTDs use route base now and legacy crypto map style. The reason why it's called legacy crypto map because now everything is moving to a route based style VPN. So most people are starting to configure route based VPNs on FTDs and not crypto map styles because crypto map is not always on if traffic's not going through it. With route base, you're basically treating the firewall like a router at that point with security features on top of it. I don't want to say that. Don't take that too literal because it's a firewall. It's not a router. All right. So again, route-based style is better because with things like the cloud, Azure, AWS, they all do route-based style VPNs. Anything with SASE base, which is either Prisma Access or Secure Access or FortiSASE, they're usually all route-based styles because you're doing a tunnel up to that service, right? You're never gonna use a crypto map legacy style VPN for SASE. All right. And then you got your security profiles. Where did you see this? Palo Alto. Now you see why I keep saying in the space, and you will hear Palo Alto, and then you will hear Fortinet as a poor man's Palo Alto, because let's be honest, Palo Alto is pretty expensive, right? So if you don't have the Palo Alto price, in the past and back in the day, if you didn't have the money to get a Palo Alto, you would go to Fortinet, right? Before Cisco came out with FTDs, because at the time Cisco only had ASAs with SourceFire, and that was not the best product when it first came out. But now they got the FTD, and it kind of just start wedging in between that Palo Alto Fortinet space. Let's see. So we have antivirus. It's your antivirus policy. Again, if you look at the Palo Alto video I did with the overview, it's pretty much same thing. Well filter, same thing. And if you wanted to create a policy, you would just hit create new, and then you'd have your options that you want to create for web filtering. All right. Then you have video filter, which is fairly new. DNS filters are your DNS policies and FTDs. Application control, same thing. So if you go to application control, you would go, all right, what do I want to block? For instance, if you want to block something, let's say we wanted to block storage, some type of storage, or social media, actually, right? We can go block it, and then you would see a bunch of categories that's in there, right? And that's all you do. So you go view application signatures, and then we would go to, what do I want to do? Let's see if I do social media. And this is all going through like off the top of my head since the last time I did that. So yeah, so you would look up Facebook and you can actually go in here and a lot of stuff you can if you create your own custom one, you can block a lot of this stuff, right? And again, I'm doing a lot of this off the brain if you wanted to block this stuff. Look, they got Quick in here now. It's Quick is taking over. So there's a lot of stuff that you can block. IPS, same thing. If you want to create an IPS function, you would create your IPS profile here, and then you would attach it to your rule if you wanted to attach it to a rule. Botnet and command and control, scan outgoing connections for botnet sites. You would go to block because you don't want your machine to get hit with a command and control because now I'm gonna turn you one machine and then get another machine, and then eventually I'll have a botnet running inside your network, and I'll sell it to somebody to do some type of attack on something. So you can do that. File filter. Let me get out of that because it looks like it is doing some weirdness on me. All right. So this is basically the same thing. Let me make sure. Uh-oh. I might have to log out and log back in here. Yeah, I lost connection to the FortiGate. So let's see. All right. It doesn't look there. Let's make sure the GUI didn't screw up on me. Come on, FortiGate. Look like something happened with the database, I believe. Oh, come on now. Do this here. I may have to reboot this. So let me reboot the Fortinet. Now this is probably because my lab is tanking on me. Yep. Look like there may be something going on with from the lab perspective. So we just gonna hot shut it down and turn it back up. Which not surprised here because I got so many things running. That the lab could have did some goofiness, but you guys get to see this live. So again, I don't do the I got to do this thing over and over and over again to make it a perfect. Now I mean, you guys are getting to see. Hey man, when you lab some of this stuff up, it can mess up. So we'll wait for this thing to come back in there. Slide this over here real quick, so I'll look at it behind the scenes. Let's see here. All right. Let's see if we can log back in. Yeah, it looked like there was something wonky going on that I had to. Okay, here we go. We're still doing the wonky stuff. All right, so it looked like we had a little hiccup there with the image, but you guys got to see it. Now, next thing we're gonna go through here is I did do file filter, which is just your malware file policy and FTDs and your file policies and Palo Altos and your SSL decryption stuff. Now, let's look at network. So network is, like I said, pretty easy. We have interfaces, DNS, packet capture if you want to do a packet capture, SD-WAN, static routes if you want to configure static routes, PBR, and then RIP, OSPF, and BGP. And then you have multicast and some routing objects, right? If you want to do dynamic routing somewhere in here or multicast. But pretty simple setup. We have our FortiLink, our aggregate here. If we wanted to create like a port channel, I would go and create a port channel here if I wanted to. Like if I go to interface, if I wanted to create an interface and I wanted to do a port channel, you would just do this and then you add your interfaces in there, but we're not going to do that. And then we would go to a aggregate. There you go. And then you would add your interfaces that you want to add to an aggregate. But I haven't actually configured it yet, so and I only have a little bit of ports, so I can't really use anything for an aggregate. So if I had more ports here, if I had like 4, 5, and 6, I can create that new aggregate port by doing the create new and then add 4, 5, and 6. And basically it's like LACP in the background. That's basically what it is. Open LACP. And then you can, you know, if one port goes down, automatically picks up on the other one. So you have load balancing there, which I suggest people do on firewalls, configure port channels and stuff like that. Then we have our zones. We create the zones. So zoning is back here compared to checkpoint. There was no zones, but we have zones here. Then we have the LAN port configuration. So if I go edit here, very simple setup. You do a manual configuration. I did not allow any kind of management on the LAN interface. And then we have a DHCP server. You actually configure the DHCP server underneath the interface that you want it to come from, compared to Palo Alto, that was a separate section. FTD, that's in routing, so that's a separate section as well. This, you do the DHCP server directly from the interface that you want to configure it on. So again, it makes it a lot simple to configure DHCP settings on a FortiGate, because you don't have to go to another menu to do that. You just do it right under the interface. Then we have our WAN port, pretty much the same here. I'm going to edit. Nothing from a management standpoint. And then we have our just static interface. Now, there is a thing called a VDOM, which is technically virtual domain, which is technically a separate virtual router on Palo Alto and a VRF on FTDs. But I'm not going to get into VDOMs because that can get a little wonky. This is just an overview video, I won't get into VDOMs for that. So we have this here, FortiLink. That's another ecosystem for Fortinet. So if you don't have the ecosystem, you're pretty much not going to be using that. Your tunnel interfaces, that is for RAVPN, or you can do. This is mainly for RAVPN. Last time I remember, or NAT interfaces if I'm NAT and stuff. But nothing's assigned to it. I'm not referencing anything. That's another thing. You can actually, in FortiGate, on the FortiGate, you can actually see where an interface is referenced. So as you can see, we got this zone is referenced in 3 different areas. Another zone is in 2 different areas, right? It will show you, and this is cool. I'm not going to lie. This is cool. It will actually show you where this object is being referenced. So remember, it said 3, so I'm referencing it in an address. I'm referencing the zone in the central NAT policy, and I'm referencing it in the firewall policy. This is pretty cool. I'm not going to lie. And I think I believe this is 100% to FortiGate. Like, this is FortiGate's implementation, its only thing. I didn't see this in the other firewalls. I could be blind, and it could be somewhere in Palo Alto, could be somewhere in FTD, but I haven't seen it. But this is pretty cool that you can see where something is referenced. Right. So outside LAN interface is going to be, it's referenced in the zone, and it's referenced in a DHCP server configuration, which is pretty cool. DNS is just if you want to specify the DNS for the local box itself or the firewall itself. Packet capture, again, you want to do a packet capture, you can capture off an interface, whatever you want, right? And then you use some filters. If you want to configure some filters and say, okay, the filter is it's coming from this host on this port for this protocol, stuff like that. And then it'll show you the packet capture here. And then once you have the packet capture, you can actually, take a look at it, download it, put it in Wireshark, the whole nine. SD-WAN is for the SD-WAN capabilities. We don't have anything. As you can see, SASE is here, so I don't have anything in here yet, so haven't configured that. Static route, this is your normal static route. Static routes are super easy. You just create the new, give it whatever, where you want to go, and then the interface it goes out to, and enable it. And then you can set the priority if you want to do like load balancing and say, okay, this route is going to go out of this interface. If that goes down, go use the other interface, but you have to do some type of tracking for that. Then we have our policy-based routing. This is basically PBR. So inside interface, outside interface, source, destination. You can do PBR for that one. RIP, if you understand routing protocols, same thing. OSPF, same thing. You just go literally down the line. Areas, the networks you want to do, the interfaces you want to put it on. BGP, same thing. Right? Neighbor groups if you want to do neighbor groups, but you would really do just the neighbors here. right? Routing objects would be prefix list, access list, or route maps, access list, prefix list, AS path, and community lists. This is all BGP attributes that you can configure. If you know BGP, you know what all these are, right? You know what all these are. Now you may not know what AS paths, but I did a video on that. And you may not know what community lists are, but you know what prefix lists, access lists, and route maps are. Multicast, haven't really seen people do multicast on an FTD. So not FTD, Fortinet on a Fortinet. So you enable it, and then you can do your rendezvous point and interfaces that you want to enable multicast routing on. We're almost done here. So now we're going to go to policy. So policy, pretty simple. They all look the same. Go to firewall policy, same thing. You open it up. This is my internet. This is that Texas net rule that I had, which I'm just saying from the source of our LAN to all. We're gonna have an always schedule on. These are the ports I have here. Now I should have put quick on here. Let's edit this actually. I'm gonna edit this the long way. So let's edit this because this is what it looks like. What you want to do, if you want to add here, this is pretty cool setup here. Quick. Is Quick even available on here? I don't know if Quick's on here. Oh, so they don't have Quick on here. I would have to create. Yeah, they didn't have Quick on here, which they should, but I would have to create the report. Create the port for Quick by hitting create and then add it in here. But as you can see, once you click something, this menu slides out. All right. And then here's just read it. LAN, WAN, going in LAN, go sourcing from LAN, going to all for these ports except, and it's going to be flow based. Now, again, this goes back to what I keep telling you guys. Once you know one, you pretty much can learn the other one super quick. Just learn one firewall, learn the logic of a next generation firewall, and then it makes learning the other ones super easy. The only thing you really have to learn that's a little different is how they do RVPN, how they do site to site VPNs, and then the little nuances like, oh, what's the malware policy? Do they have like a cloud analysis feature in it like Wildfire or, secure endpoint stuff? Or if they got that or Talos, things like that, if they have some type of back end dynamic analysis, how do you get that working? Once you know one thing, though, you can pretty much fly through these firewalls. Again, I'm doing all these comparisons off of memory, right? So I've learned like I said, Checkpoint first was my first introduction, then uh, Palos, FTDs, and then Fortinet. So once I learned Checkpoint, which is weird because Checkpoint doesn't actually have the same logic as all these other ones, but once you know once I got to like FTDs and really mastered the FTD, then we got the Palo, then I mastered the FTD. And when I got the Fortinet, I was like, oh, I've seen this already before. It's just a different menu. Once you understood the logic, it's easy to get this set up. By no means am I saying I'm a Fortinet master. My firewall of choice is FTDs. I'm an expert in that. And again, I'm proficient in all the other ones here. So as you can see, one thing I brought up now, remember I told you in the firewall policy, you can actually put the NAT role in the policy. That would be here, right? If I wanted to do that. But since I'm using centralized NAT, I can figure the NAT policy there, or centralized SNAT. And then just like on Palo Altos, just like on Fortinets, just like on FTDs, just like on checkpoints, you would activate the security now in FTDs and Palo Altos as profiles. So you would activate the individual profiles that you want, and then you would enable your logging, and then you would find your logging under the forwarded traffic, right, that I showed you before. So now let's talk about centralized SNAT. So this is your policy, your NAT policy outside of doing the natting in the firewall policy itself. So for here, what I'm just saying is LAN to WAN, sourcing it from here, going to all destinations, um, NAT it to the interface. So if I open this up and go to edit here, LAN, WAN coming from my source, going to all, we're going to NAT it to the outgoing interface. If I wanted to do a dynamic IP pool, you click that, and then you'd have to create the pool here. So if I hit create, I would have to actually either do a one-to-one. I could do an overload if I wanted to, and just put a single IP in there and do an overload, or I could do a one-to-one mapping, which is basically a static stuff like that. I'm not really going to do a NAT64 unless I'm doing IPv6. But that's how you would do a dynamic pool. But pretty much, I'm just netting it to the outside interface for all the protocols. And then you would create that centralized net. So it's the reason why I use centralized SNet is because I want to see what am I netting outside of I just want the firewall policy to just be the firewall policy. I don't want it to be the firewall and NAT policy, right? So I'm glad they came out with this. And you have to actually turn that on. Remember that box, that little checkbox I showed you said centralized SNet? Once you turn that on, that box shows up here. If you do not turn it on, that box does not show up here, and you have to create the NAT policy in the firewall policy. So you can see, coming from other firewalls, that can be a little confusing when you first learn the FortiGate. So then we got our objects here, normal objects. I think TXLAN is here, pretty simple. Services are ports. Schedules always going to be always, but most people, you can schedule when a rule is supposed to go. So this could be your like time-based rule if you use that. Most people do not use time-based rules, by the way. Then you have your DNet, which is destination net virtual IP. So this is if you are going to have somebody going into your network from a public IP, you would have to do it here. So for your destination net, you would just do destination net virtual IPs. And then you would have from your WAN interface here, then you would have the IP address, whatever IP address you want to put it to, and then you would map it to the real address, right? You could do port forwarding if you wanted to, if you wanted to port forward a port, but most people are just going to do a one-to-one kind of situation, destination net. And then once you do that, it shows up, and then you need to just create your firewall policy that allows that outbound and inbound traffic. IP pools, just like they sound, IP pools that you want to assign either overload one-to-one, and then you can use those in your centralized NAT policy. And then your protocol options, which are default services. If you want to create a protocol option, you would say all of these. You can turn it on, turn it off. Most people don't really use this per se, but it is an option. Traffic shaping is your QoS stuff. Now, FTDs do not have traffic shaping. It's traffic policing. Palo Alto's have traffic shaping, and Fortinet has traffic shaping. I don't remember if Checkpoint has that off the top of my head, but if you know what um, traffic shaping is, a technique to basically buffer traffic. So if you say, hey, I want to shape this traffic to 5 gigs, and let's say you had a 10 gig interface. How do I want to? Let's say you had 5 gig interface, but your service provider, if you get up to 5 gigs, or if you get past 5 gigs, if you're pushing 5 gigs for some odd reason, more than 5 gigs for some odd reason. So let's say it's a 10 gig link between you and the service provider, but the service provider says you can only push 5 gigs. You bought 5 gigs, so I'm gonna give you 5 gigs. Now they're gonna be policing on their end to probably drop your traffic if you go past 5 gigs. If you push, 6 gigs, it's going to drop the remaining 1 gig because you're only allowed to do 5 gigs, right? And that's probably going to be a 2 bucket policer, right? There is a 3 bucket policer as well, but they're probably going to give you a 2 bucket policer. So to avoid all that, you just shape it on your end to say, hey, I don't care how much traffic I got. I want you to buffer it so it's only 5 gigs being sent at a time. Just only 5 gigs. It's a stream of 5 gigs at the most, right? So it buffers, it slows down the traffic, so it buffers it so that it never goes over 5 gigs, which is your committed information rate, which is a CRT, which if you configure traffic policing in Cisco routers or Juniper, I'll say Cisco routers because that's what I know for a fact. If you configure policing on the Cisco router, it's going to ask you for the committed information rate. Okay, so you want to shape it there, and that is FortiGate in a nutshell. Again, FortiGate is, I don't know if they still have that reputation as the poor man's Palo Alto, but I know in certain spaces people still use that. It is a great firewall to learn, next generation firewall, because it's the easiest to implement. I'm going to tell you flat out right now, FortiGates are probably the simplest firewall to learn. All right. And since it's a next generation firewall, you also learn the logic of a next generation firewall. So if you were just starting out, because I did it the hard way with the checkpoint, if I was just starting out learning like firewalls, next generation firewalls, I would learn FortiGate first. Then I would learn Palo Altos because of and I'm only saying that because the GUI is a lot better than the FDM, right? So FDM still needs some work. Then I would learn FTDs from the FDM perspective. Now, if we're talking about uh, ma- uh, management, off box management, then I'm gonna say I would go Cisco FMC or SMC, Panorama, then Forta Manager. Because I'm gonna be honest with you, Forta Manager is not that intuitive, right? From a administration standpoint. Now, it might change, but the last time I saw Forta Manager wasn't that intuitive, right? Compared to the other things in the market. Like if we're gonna look at this top down again, I would say Cisco's FMC SMC is top because it's very clear from a management standpoint what you're doing there. Then I would say Panorama right there. They kind of go neck and neck. Let's be honest, they kind of go neck and neck when it comes to management or off box management. Then Checkpoint, because you saw the Checkpoint. The only difference is you have to get around. You definitely have to get around the fact that routing and the policies are separate. The routing still is handled in the GUI, and then the policies are handled. I mean, you can technically do it in the actual smart console, but it's not really that intuitive. And then for the manager, kind of, I would say for the man, you depending on who you ask, for the manager maybe third, right? Depending on who you ask. Now you're asking me again, FMC and Panorama are kind of the top, and then you can interchange Checkpoint and Fortinet from off board, off box management. So yeah, man, this is the Fortinet platform. Very easy to configure, very easy to kind of learn next generation firewalls on. I'll probably do some more videos to do some more in-depth concept on all these firewalls. So FTDs, I did a whole bunch of stuff on that. Palos, Fortinet, and checkpoints. I'll do some videos there. Hope this video was informative. If you got any questions or like to see certain things, it's going to be a video bumper at the end and well, the email address so you can send your questions. I don't know everything, but I know a lot. So if I can answer it, again, I'll do a video response just like I'm doing now. And I'll let you know that I'm doing the video response. This is Don from Padlock Technologies again. Don't forget to share, comment, like, and subscribe. Thank you. Have a nice day.